At 29, Camille Foster was finally hitting her stride. After nearly a decade of clawing her way up the ranks in the cutthroat world of advertising, she had landed her dream role as a creative director at a top agency in Chicago. With sharp instincts, a razor-sharp wit, and a knack for turning products into viral sensations, Camille was a star on the rise. Clients requested her by name. Junior creatives idolized her. Her apartment, nestled on the 13th floor of a sleek downtown high-rise, was a testament to her success. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist decor, and the kind of curated artwork that screamed confidence. But success, as she would soon learn, had its price. Camille often joked that her love life was a series of perfectly executed ad campaigns, enticing at first, only to fizzle out by the second week. That is, until she met Mason. He wasn't like the others. A software engineer turned startup founder, Mason Carter had an easy smile, a calm confidence, and the kind of eyes that made you believe he saw right through the chaos of your life and liked what he saw. They met at a mutual friend's gallery opening, where he stood slightly apart from the crowd, sipping whiskey and watching the art with a quiet intensity. "Are you always this brooding, or is it just the lighting?" Camille had teased. He chuckled, and the rest was, as they say, a blur of perfect dates, late-night conversations, and the heady rush of a romance that felt like destiny. Within months, Camille found herself doing things she'd once sworn off, rescheduling meetings, taking long weekends, flying out to San Francisco just to spend 48 hours with Mason while he pitched to investors. She told herself it was balance, that it was healthy to make time for love. Her friends noticed the shift. "You're glowing," her best friend Jada had said. "But are you sure you're not dimming your light a little too much for him?" Camille waved off the concern. Mason wasn't just another guy. He was different. He saw her in a way no one else ever had. So when Mason asked her to move in with him, to leave Chicago and join him in California as he expanded his tech company, Camille didn't hesitate. "I believe in us," he said one night, as they lay tangled in each other under dim bedroom lights. "I want to build something real with you." It was the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to her. She gave her notice at work the next morning. Moving to San Mateo was like stepping into another universe. Gone were the towering skyscrapers and high-powered boardroom drama. In their place, redwood-lined jogging trails, warm coastal breezes, and the sound of Mason typing late into the night in his sleek home office. At first, it felt like a dream. They had wine nights on the patio, movie marathons wrapped in blankets, and quiet mornings filled with coffee and laughter. Camille threw herself into redecorating their new home and even started a blog documenting her transition from corporate executive to life partner and creator in progress. It gained a modest following, mostly women who admired her bravery for following love. But as weeks turned into months, Camille began to feel unmoored. She missed the thrill of campaign pitches, the creative brainstorms, the unapologetic ambition of her old life. Mason, meanwhile, was always busy working with investors, managing his team, traveling to Seattle, Boston, New York. Camille would wake up some mornings to find his side of the bed cold and a text saying, "Had to catch an early flight. You're amazing. Talk later." Their conversations grew shorter. His kisses more distracted. When she asked him about it, Mason assured her everything was fine. "I'm just under pressure. The company's close to a major breakthrough," he said. "You know I love you, right?" She nodded, but the ache in her chest didn't go away. Then came the first red flag. One afternoon, Camille decided to surprise Mason at his office with lunch. But when she arrived at the sleek downtown building, the receptionist frowned. "Mason Carter?" she asked. "I'm sorry, I don't believe he works here. Are you sure you have the right company?" Camille blinked, confused. "This is Vector Tech, right?" The receptionist nodded. "Yes, but we've never had a Mason Carter on staff. Maybe he's from a partner firm?" Camille mumbled a thank you and left, heart pounding. That night, when she confronted Mason, he barely flinched. "Oh, yeah. I told you I use a WeWork across town now. That old office was just for meetings with an investor who pulled out." He brushed it off with such ease such casual authority, that she almost believed him. Almost. But the seed of doubt had been planted. Over the next few weeks, Camille began noticing other inconsistencies: receipts from restaurants she'd never been to, long gaps in his calendar, strange phone calls he'd take in another room. Once, she caught a glimpse of a text on his lock screen that simply read, "Can't wait to see you again. Friday's perfect." He told her it was from an investor. She told herself to trust him. But trust, once fractured, rarely heals cleanly. One evening, while Mason was out at yet another networking dinner, Camille opened his laptop. She told herself she was just curious, not snooping. But the password didn't work. She tried his usual, her birthday. His birthday. The name of his company. All wrong. Her heart sank. The man who had convinced her to leave her life behind had suddenly become a stranger with secrets. That night, she didn't sleep. And in the silence of their pristine bedroom, she asked herself the question she'd been avoiding for weeks. What if Mason wasn't who he said he was at all? Camille always believed she had a strong intuition. That gut instinct had once saved her from a major PR disaster at her old job, and it had guided her to countless creative wins. But now, that same instinct had morphed into an ever-present knot in her stomach, warning her that something in her picture-perfect life was deeply wrong. The man she had trusted enough to leave everything for, her career, her city, her identity, was slowly unraveling before her eyes. After the failed attempt to access Mason's laptop, Camille tried to push the incident out of her mind. Maybe she was overthinking it. Maybe he really did change his work setup. Maybe she just needed to breathe. But denial, she realized, could only take her so far. The next day, Camille reached out to Jada via FaceTime. She hadn't told her best friend much since the move, trying to preserve the image of happiness she'd sold to herself and everyone else. But as soon as Jada's familiar face appeared on the screen, the facade cracked. "I think something's off with Mason," she blurted, voice trembling. Jada raised an eyebrow. "Off how?" Camille exhaled and told her everything: the office confusion, the locked laptop, the sketchy text messages. Jada didn't hesitate. "Girl, you need to start digging. Protect yourself. You left everything for this man, and now you don't even know where he works?" Camille hesitated. "But what if I'm wrong? What if you're not?" Jada shot back. "You don't wait around to find out after it's too late." That was all the encouragement Camille needed. Over the next few days, while Mason was conveniently out pitching to angel investors, Camille began her quiet investigation. She started small, Googling the company he claimed to own. Vector Tech had a sparse website and a few press mentions from 2 years ago, but none listed Mason Carter as the founder or CEO. In fact, there was no mention of him at all. Curious, she searched his name more broadly. There were some social media accounts, mostly inactive. No LinkedIn presence. No articles. Nothing that screamed entrepreneurial genius the way Mason had described himself. It was as if he existed only in her world. Then she dug deeper. Using a friend's background check service, Camille entered Mason's full name, date of birth, and last known addresses. What came back chilled her to the bone. Mason Carter had changed his name 3 years ago. Before that, he'd been Eli Marcus Rivers. And Eli Rivers had a record. Fraud. Grand larceny. Suspended sentence. Sealed juvenile offenses. Camille felt like the room was spinning. How had she never seen this? How had she not known? Tears welled up as she clicked through the court documents. He had served time in his early 20s for a massive investment scam, targeting older women online by pretending to be a promising entrepreneur. Sound familiar? Worse, one of the women had filed a civil lawsuit after discovering she had cashed out her 401k for a fake venture he'd never actually launched. Camille's heart shattered. This wasn't just a man with secrets. This was a predator. When Mason came home that evening, smelling like expensive bourbon and pretending to be exhausted, Camille played her part. She smiled, reheated dinner, made light conversation. But inside, she was already planning her exit. The next morning, while Mason was in the shower, she grabbed her essentials, laptop, phone, passport, wallet, and quietly left the house. She didn't have a car, so she called a rideshare and had it drop her off at a hotel a few towns over. Then she texted Jada. "You were right. He's not who he says he is. I'm out." Camille spent the next 2 days piecing together her next steps. She called an old contact from her advertising agency, explained the bare bones of her situation, and asked if there were any openings. By some miracle, there was an upcoming maternity leave at one of their satellite offices in Portland. It wasn't creative director, but it was a lifeline. As she started packing her things into storage and preparing for the move, Camille received a message from an unknown number. "I know what you did. You went through my things. Call me now." Her blood ran cold. Mason, or Eli, had found out. That night, her hotel room phone rang. She didn't answer. But the voicemail that followed made her skin crawl. "You think you're smarter than me? After everything I did for you? You'll regret this, Camille. Don't push me." Camille immediately called the police. She showed them everything, the name change, the threats, the voicemail. The officer listened, nodded, and told her, "He hasn't technically broken any laws yet. But we can help you file a restraining order. And I suggest you don't stay in one place too long." It wasn't much, but it was something. Camille filed for the order and booked a flight to Portland the next morning. She didn't tell Jada where she was going, just in case. She switched her phone number, deleted her blog, and went completely off-grid. It was the hardest thing she'd ever done. But Camille wasn't the same woman who had packed up her life for a man she barely knew. That woman had been blinded by love, by hope, by the fantasy of something real. This Camille was awake now, and she was angry. As she boarded the plane, her heart pounding, Camille made a silent vow. He had taken enough from her. It was time to take back her life. The air in Portland felt different, cleaner, quieter, calmer. The towering trees, the rolling mist in the mornings, the way people didn't rush everywhere, it was everything Camille hadn't known she needed. But even as the city offered her a kind of refuge, the trauma of what she'd left behind lingered. For the first time in her adult life, she didn't feel like she was building something. She felt like she was hiding. Her temporary role at the agency was a godsend, but even there, she kept her head down. Her co-workers were kind, but Camille offered only fragments of herself, never talking about her past, never giving away more than what was absolutely necessary. She had changed her number, locked down her social media, and even began using her middle name, Elise, when ordering coffee or signing up for anything public-facing. Every knock at the door startled her. Every unknown number triggered her heart to pound. Though it had been 3 weeks since she'd left San Mateo, Camille knew that men like Mason, no, Eli, didn't just let go. One afternoon, she received a manila envelope in the mail at the agency. There was no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a printed message. "You can run, but you can't hide forever. I always find what's mine." She felt the floor beneath her tilt. Camille took the letter straight to the Portland police. But again, there wasn't much they could do. "No direct threat of violence," the officer told her with a shrug. "We can increase patrols near your home and office, but unless he's physically here, it's still a gray area." Gray area. That phrase became the weight around Camille's chest. Until that moment, she had been in survival mode. Move, hide, rebuild. But now, it was clear, Eli wasn't going to stop. He wasn't going to quietly disappear. He had stolen her peace. And Camille realized she couldn't afford to keep running. Not anymore. She decided to fight back. The first thing she did was contact one of Eli's previous victims. It wasn't hard to find her. Her name was Margaret Stiles, and she had spoken out in a local newspaper years ago, warning others about a charming young man who ruined my life with lies. Camille sent a cautious, respectful message through LinkedIn. "Hi Margaret, my name is Camille Foster. I believe I was targeted by the same man who hurt you. I'm in Portland now and would like to speak with you, if you're open to it." Margaret responded within hours. They spoke the next evening via Zoom. Margaret was in her late 50s, with sharp eyes and a voice like steel. "I'm sorry you went through this," she said after hearing Camille's story. "But I'm not surprised. I warned the authorities years ago. He just slipped through the cracks." "Did you ever get justice?" Camille asked. Margaret shook her head. "He pled out to a lesser charge. Got a slap on the wrist. Disappeared. You're the first person who's contacted me since. But I've kept records. Everything he did to me. Bank statements. Fake business proposals. Emails. All of it." Camille's heart raced. "Would you share them with me?" "Absolutely," Margaret said. "And maybe it's time someone finally stopped him." Together, they began to piece it all together. Over the next few weeks, Camille and Margaret assembled a portfolio of evidence. Camille even reached out to 2 other women she'd found on old message boards, both of whom had similar stories: a man with a charming smile, a promising business, a whirlwind romance, and a sudden vanishing act, usually after draining money or leveraging their resources. But Camille was different. He hadn't stolen her money, he had stolen her life. And now she had nothing left to lose. With Margaret's help, Camille submitted a detailed complaint to the California Attorney General's office, accompanied by sworn statements from the women and a digital folder of all the supporting evidence. Then Camille did something bold. She went public. Using a pseudonym, she submitted her story to a popular investigative podcast called Unmasked. The producers were immediately intrigued. They reached out for an interview. Camille agreed, under one condition: her real name wouldn't be released until Eli was in custody. The episode aired 3 weeks later. It went viral. Within 72 hours, the podcast received dozens of emails from women across the country who said they had also been scammed, manipulated, or emotionally abused by a man who sounded exactly like Eli Rivers. Some had photos. Others had texts. Some had receipts, contracts, or letters of apology he'd written after being caught. The web of lies stretched back nearly a decade. The podcast did a follow-up episode. Then a local newspaper picked it up. Then a national outlet. It exploded. A week later, Camille got a call from a detective in California. "We have him," he said. Eli had been living under yet another alias in Los Angeles, posing as a venture consultant. He was arrested for fraud, identity theft, and violating a restraining order. But this time, thanks to Camille's organized effort and the mountain of public support, the DA pushed for the maximum. Camille watched the trial unfold on a live stream from Portland. She didn't testify in person, but her written statement was read in court. It ended with a single line: "I gave up everything for love. But what he gave me in return was a cage built on lies." The judge called Eli a manipulative predator with a history of calculated emotional abuse and sentenced him to 14 years without parole. Months passed. The fear slowly faded. Camille began to breathe again. She stayed in Portland, took a permanent role at the agency, and eventually moved into a small house with a garden. She reconnected with Jada. She went to therapy. And one evening, as she stood beneath the soft glow of string lights in her backyard, wine glass in hand, she realized something powerful. She hadn't lost herself. She had survived. And more than that, she had saved others from falling into the same trap. She still believed in love. But she would never again mistake charm for character. And she would never again dim her light to fit into someone else's shadow.